you're experiencing abuse yourself, and then you're watching abuse happen, and just being this tiny little kid having no idea what any of it meant, but then knowing every single night before bed we're going to pray to this God that is supposed to be in heaven and be watching us. You know what I mean? Hallowed be thy name, like your kingdom come, your will be done. And I just was like, I don't know. So is this the will of God?
Lacy, welcome to the happy hour.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I am over the moon excited to have you on, and I want to tell everybody that right before you got on, you were on a walk. And this is the month of June, and the month of June, I have dedicated 30 minutes outside every day for the month of June.
Love it.
And now, full disclosure, we're recording on June 6th. So far, I'm 6 for 6. I'm like,
hey, that's
doing well.
That's something to be proud of. Yeah.
This show comes out on the 28th. I hope to be able to say I'm 28 for 28.
You will be.
Okay. Do you like walking?
I love walking.
Tell me why.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's the best way to start your day is outside because we need the sun. I've realized like my mental health, the quality of my life just improves so much when I'm outside. So every morning I like to start my day off with a walk. I get up, obviously we live in Texas, so the heat starts at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Unsure how that's possible, but I try to wake up around 7, be on my walk at 7:30. And I usually try to walk for 30 minutes to an hour. And I feel like, yeah, it's a good time for me to either listen to a podcast or worship music or nothing at all and just talk to the Lord. And it's like, literally, I'm not kidding, has improved the quality of my life. It starts your day off so good to go on a walk.
I love it so much. So I love walking just in general. My neighborhood is beautiful, so I love that. It's kind of in the country, so it's not like bustling city. I listen to podcasts mostly, but every once in a while, I'll either accidentally or on purpose, every once in a while, leave my headphones at home, and then I'm forced to be in my thoughts, maybe be in my feelings, maybe talk to the Lord. And so what'd you listen to today?
I listened to Becoming Something with Jonathan Pokluda. And then one of the ones I love to listen to is Lisa Harper's Back Porch Theology. I just love listening to that. So I listened to that yesterday. This morning I listened to Becoming Something.
2 great shows. Love both of those people dearly, dearly, dearly. Okay. I want you to introduce yourself to my listeners before we jump in to hear your encounter story.
Awesome. Well, I'm Lacy, and I'm 30 and I'm from Texas. It's just like, I feel like every time I introduce myself, I'm like, it sounds like I'm introducing myself as like my dating profile. I'm like,
okay, well, give us your dating profile.
I'm single. I like to go for long walks in the morning at 7 a.m. before the sun is out and too hot. I love coffee. My favorite drink is the Good Morning from Tribal All Day Cafe. And I love Jesus.
Okay, I want to set the backstage for how we met each other. Somehow, like it is in the day that we live in, we connected on the internet. Okay, like we both work on the internet. Yeah, it is a weird time to be alive, right?
Agree.
So we connected, and I was like, I really am intrigued by this girl, and I really like her. And so I said, hey, you should come on the happy hour. And then like nothing ever happened because I never really invited you. It was like a kind of throw out invite. Did you feel like I ghosted you?
Oh yeah.
Were you sad?
I was devastated. Well, here's the thing. I've always been a Jamie Ivey fan. And before I was a Jamie Ivey fan, I was an Aaron Ivey fan because he leads Worship Austin Stone and I love him. So, but I have always loved Jamie Ivey, and everybody loves Jamie Ivey, obviously. If you're listening, you get it. But I was like such a huge fan. And then when you messaged me, I like screenshotted it and like sent it to my whole phone book. I was like, guys, everybody stay calm. Jamie Ivey messaged me and she invited me on our podcast. And then everyone's like, so did you go on? I was like, never heard from her again.
I have already apologized to you about that in our real life where I can look you in the eyes and hold your hands.
Yeah.
But I think it's a funny story. So
love keeps no record of wrongs, girl.
There you go. And then in the spring, we were at, this sounds really cool. Like I've never done this. I probably will never do this again in my time.
Me neither.
We were at a red carpet premiere.
Yeah.
Hello. And we reconnected there, and then we were at Lisa Harper's Charisma conference in the spring. And so we've reconnected. And so now we are like real life friends, and I will not
Yeah.
ghost you anymore. Like, we have each other's phone numbers. We're
Thank you,
friends.
God.
And
Yeah,
so
we
I'm so
are.
happy. I'm so happy. I don't know if I ever told you this. When we were at that red carpet event, you know, I had my son Caden there,
Yes.
and I was like weirdly super nervous about not what to wear. Okay. So I'm like, I don't know what to wear, whatever. And so I bring something chill. Like, I bought brand new pants from,
Yeah,
you
you
know.
looked amazing.
Okay. I got brand new pants. Where'd I get them? Anthropologie, I think.
Yep.
I see your story with you and your friend, and you guys looked phenomenal. You guys had dresses on. You looked stunning. And I showed it to my son, Caden, and I said, Caden, I'm going to say out loud what I say to friends all the time. Show up and be you, but I'm saying it to myself. Like,
Yeah.
because I felt like you guys looked amazing, and I looked,
Mm-mm.
whatever. But it was a moment where I was like, you know what? Just take on the advice you tell everyone else. And so
Totally.
I had that moment, and you didn't even know about it. But
Well, you
there
know
it
what's
is.
funny is I had the same moment about you where I saw your outfit and your hair and makeup, and I literally thought to myself, oh, I'm way overdoing this, and I wish I was wearing what she's wearing. And you didn't even know
You
that.
know, this is a conversation that happens, or that needs to happen more, and to say out loud, is that so many times we're in our head, and here's the thing, everyone's thinking the same thing. Or
Totally.
this is what my husband tells me all the time, Jamie, people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they're thinking about you.
So
And
true.
so no one thought anything about you or I when we walked in. No one thought like, ooh, overdress, underdress. No one was talking about us. It was all
Nope.
in our head.
Yep. We were the only ones thinking about that at that time.
We were the only ones thinking about it.
Yeah.
Anyhow, okay. Now I want to talk to you because we're in the middle of this encounter series, and we do this through the month of June and July every year. And honestly, Lacy, it is probably one of my top favorite things about being a podcaster is this series that we do in the summer, because I really am inviting people on and just saying, hey, tell me about how you met Jesus. Like, tell me how he changed your life, and tell me what that looked like. And so it's really just you getting to open up and tell us your story. So I start everywhere as like, what did your relationship with faith look like growing up? And then tell me the story of what led you to following Jesus and deciding that he's worth it.
I love that. Yeah. So, my parents got divorced when I was 7 months old. So I always start my story off with that because I was born into dysfunction, and which is a lot of people's story, divorced parents. And my both of my parents are great people, and I know that they did the best they could. But yeah, 7 months old. My mom is on her fourth marriage. My dad just got out of his fifth. And I have two older brothers. So I'm 30 and they're 31 and 32. And they are 6'6" and 6'8". They're giants. 7 months old, they got divorced. My mom had custody of us for the most part. My dad, they had, I guess, split custody. So every other weekend we would see my dad if he showed up. And my dad has been a functioning alcoholic my entire life. I do not remember a day without him drinking. And when my mom got remarried after my dad, she married a man who was very involved in the church. And so I was about 3 years old. So they were married from the time I was 3 until I was probably 6, 3 to 5, really young. And this was my first experience with really the church that I can remember. And he was really involved in the church. And every single night, he had two kids, and every single night we would all like get together and hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I'm just like this tiny little girl. I'm like, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Hey, but heaven was with me. But anyway, so I was praying these prayers, and this man ended up being the man that physically abused my mom. And so my mom's a survivor of domestic violence, and she's amazing and one of my heroes. But it was brutal. And when you're so young, wow, I never get emotional about this, but for some reason I am today. But when you're so young and you see that kind of abuse in front of you, mixed with somebody who is supposed to love God and be a picture of the church, and that's what marriage ultimately is. And I'm so young. I just remember being very confused by that. And both of my brothers to this day will not set foot back inside of a church because of that experience.
Mm,
I believe one day they will, but it marked them forever. It
yeah.
marks you. And so,
Understandably. I mean, it's like you're sitting there and you're hearing, it's like just someone speaking out of both sides of their mouth. And when you do that with the church, it's really, really hard.
yeah, and it was really harmful. And I look back and I'm like, that was a very, just an ugly picture of the church, and
Mm,
an ugly picture of a misconstrued picture of who God is and how much he
mm-hmm.
loves us. And so, his son, the man who my mom was married to, so my stepbrother, ended up abusing both my brothers and I. And again, you're just young and
Mm-hmm.
you're experiencing abuse yourself, and then you're watching abuse happen, and just being this tiny little kid having no idea what any of it meant, but then knowing every single night before bed we're going to pray to this God that is supposed to be in heaven and be
Mm-hmm.
watching us. You know what I mean? Hallowed be thy name, like your kingdom
Mm-hmm.
come, your will be done. And I just was like, I don't know. So is this
Wow.
the will of God? And so, that was our experience when we were really young. My mom ended up divorcing him, and got remarried again, and to another man who was just, he was controlling. So he controlled their finances and what she wore. And so I had this picture of womanhood my mom kind of painted for me, that she was very strong, like very strong, and has just gone through so much, but a very low sense of self-worth and value. And so
Mm-hmm.
that kind of became me. And growing up was just, I just didn't love myself. I didn't know how to do that, and I didn't think God loved me or was capable of loving somebody like me. So when I was 10 years old, we moved in with my dad, and this was huge. 10 years old is like a pivotal time in a young woman's life. I was in the fifth grade. My body was changing, my hormones were going nutso, and I just had no idea what was going on with my body. And I think in that time, I really would have preferred to stay with my mom, because my mom taught me everything about my body.
Yeah.
But instead, it was just financially not good is a
Mm-hmm.
situation. And so my brothers and I chose to live with my dad. And in that time, my older brothers were football stars. So they were just stars of the football team everywhere we went. They're huge. So they were always on the O line, just big, humongous
Mm-hmm.
guys that were just stars. And my dad just loved football, and he still loves football. And so he was just very much catering to my brothers, and understandably so. They're dudes, and that's what dudes
Mm-hmm.
do. But to me, it's so funny because now in my adult life, I look back, I'm like, that wasn't normal. That my dad
Mm,
didn't like cater to me, but he did cater to that. And so, my whole life, like from the time I was 10 until I graduated high school, and even beyond that, I was like just chasing my dad's affirmation. I'm like, oh, just please be proud of me.
yeah.
And I never felt like he was. And so,
Mm,
10 years old was just a huge year for me. It was the first time that somebody told me that my cheeks were big. It was the first time I looked at myself in a way that was like, oh, am I overweight? Like, do I need to change
mm,
something about myself? I'm 10, like I was a kid.
mm,
I should have been
mhm.
like focusing on like Lizzie McGuire, but I was like,
Right.
I have big cheeks. And
Mm,
so that was the first time I experienced withholding food. And then it was the first time I viewed pornography when I was 10.
mhm,
10 years old was just a huge year for me, and it would spiral me into 6 years of an eating disorder. It would
mhm,
spiral me into self harm and an addiction to pornography that would last 11 years. So by the time I was 16 years old, I had an eating disorder. I was self harming. I was addicted to porn, and I had tried to take my own life 3 times.
mm,
And when I tell you that it was like I was the most desperate of desperate,
yeah.
anybody could have offered me any kind of hope, and I would have taken it.
Yeah.
But my whole life had felt like everybody had made my pain about them. So my dad sat me down after the third and final time I tried to take my own life. He sat me down, and I used to wear this big wooden bangle around my wrist that would
Mhm,
hide my self harm. And he had it
mhm,
by his bedside, and he calls me in his room. He's like, "Do you know why I have this by my bedside?" And I said, "No." And he said, "To remind myself how much I failed as a father." And I just remember in that moment thinking, like, I wish you would just see me and not make
mm,
this about you being a bad dad, but about how bad your kid is hurting. And so all
mm,
my life, I think I just really wanted someone to lock eyes with me and say, like, I love you. I care for you. Like like you're my kid. And I just didn't feel like I had that. And so at 16, I moved in with my grandma because my dad said that I was just too much for him. He's like, this is too much for me. And looking back, I just want to make sure I always honor my dad because I have so much love and compassion for him. His mom passed away when he was 10 and his dad physically abused him. And so I know without a shadow of a doubt that my dad did the best he could his whole life.
Yeah.
And so I just want to honor him for sure and honor my mom. They're just incredible people. But it just, for me as a young emotional girl, it's like I just needed something. And so I move in with my grandma, who Joyce Marie Seals was the most Jesus loving, God fearing, gospel Gaither homecoming loving woman. And I did not want to move in with her because I thought I was Avril Lavigne. And I was literally just angry. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
why do you have to go and make things so complicated? I don't want to move in with you, you crazy woman. I'm so grateful that I did because for the first few days, we didn't really talk much. I thought she was going to talk my ear off about the gospel like she always did, but we didn't really talk much. And on the third day, she comes in and she's like, hey, have something I want you to read, no pressure, but I'm just going to leave it here. And if you want to read it, you can. If not, no big deal. And she walked out. And I remember thinking, like, she is so chill. Like, she is so cool. And it was the Bible, and it was open specifically to Psalm 139. And I love writing and poetry and literature in English, and I always have. And I just remember reading about how every single hair on my head was counted, and every day of my life was planned out before I breathed a single breath, and that God's thoughts about me outnumbered the grains of sand. And whenever I wake up, He's still with me. And even whenever I went into the depths, so even when I wanted to die, God was with. I was like reading it, and I was like, there is no way that somebody loves me this much, and not just somebody, but the creator of the entire universe sees me and loves me and thinks about me. I'm like, nobody thinks about me. And it was like heaven met earth. And I just was like, I want to know this God personally. And so my grandma shared the gospel with me. I said yes. I was like, I want to know Jesus. And she got out this journal, and my grandma would always journal in red pen. And so she's like, I want to show you something. I was like, great. It's horrible red pen. It was so ugly. And she gets it out and she shows me, and it said, when my mom was pregnant with me, my nanny had journaled and said, the woman or the baby inside of Amy's belly is going to be a missionary and tell thousands of people about Jesus. And
Okay.
yeah.
Two things. First of all, what do you call your grandma?
Nanny.
Okay. First of all, Nanny was journaling before journaling was cool. I need to say that, Nanny.
So slay.
Second of all, Nanny went and found that journal where she had written down that about you. And then she was able to open a Bible and have you read Psalm 139. She was able to tell you the gospel and able to be there when you started following Jesus. I'm done.
No, I'm also done. The fact that she had the journal ready because she knew I was going to accept Jesus, like she was so prayed up is what I tell people. And like she was like, I'm almost positive that my nanny walked hand in hand with God. Like I think she literally went on walks with him, like holding his hand. Like she just was so prayed up and knew what I needed. And like God had showed her what I needed and she gave it to me. And it was like, after I like read and went into her room, I always tell people that's the first time that I like physically met Jesus, because when we hugged, it was like she was waiting for me to come home. God was waiting for me to come home. It was like I just was like, yeah, undone, really. At just
Undone.
the idea that yeah.
Is Nanny still with us?
She isn't. She passed away about 8 years ago. But she just, and I wish I was telling someone yesterday, I wish that I would have taken advantage of the time I had with her and sat and learned from her. Because I didn't love Jesus as much as I love Jesus now when I was 16.
Yeah.
I just, if I could go back in time, I would have just sat with her and just ate up every word she said. But I'm so grateful because she led me to the Lord.
That is so amazing. And I say this every time I hear someone's story about when they start following Jesus. There are obviously times where people like randomly find a Bible and then they read it. I mean, I remember my friend Holly Hayes, who's been on the show before, like she stole a Bible from the library and then she was like in a bathroom reading it. You know what I mean? And so there's definitely those stories. But the majority of stories that I hear is someone told them the good news of Jesus. And it always like gets me all up in my feelings because like that's all of us. Like that's you now to somebody, and that's me now to somebody. And my prayer with these encounter series, even that, is that like your story gets to meet somebody right where they are.
Yeah.
Okay, so 16, Nanny teaches you about this, and accept Jesus. You hug
Yeah.
Nanny and feel like God's calling me home. Nanny's been a
Yeah.
part of this, all the things. But what you and I both know is true, and I know because I did the math, your life didn't just all of a sudden go like, awesome, this is great. I'm no longer self-harming. I no longer have suicidal ideation. I no longer am looking at pornography. And again, God can do that. But I know that that's not how it worked in your life. So what was
Yeah.
life like following Jesus? I'll say from like 16 to 21, which is where I think that you kind of had maybe
Mhm.
another change. So what was that like there?
Yeah, well, I eventually had to move back in with my dad because of school zones and stuff like that. So I had to move back in, and you go back to the chaos that you already were
Right.
under. And it's like you go back to the same, like, I was like, okay, well, I know God is real, but where is he? I wasn't
Mm,
really, I think discipleship, this is why my whole life is just dedicated to face discipleship with younger women, is so important because nobody taught me how to have a relationship with God, what the Bible meant for me. Like, I didn't really understand how to cling to God's word in times that I was desperate. And so
mm,
until I was faced in desperation, I was like, well, now what?
yeah.
So I think I moved back in with my dad, and I kind of was like, God just went back on the back burner. I wasn't like on
Hmm.
fire for Jesus or anything. I was like in the middle of just chaos again. And I have six brothers and three sisters that are all like step and half, and we're all combined, and we're
Hmm.
all living under one roof having tater tot casserole. And I'm like, I'm never seen. Like, I'm always just the
Mm,
left behind. And so I just went back to that, I was like, I just believed the lie that I was alone. And
hmm.
so I still struggled. I would say whenever I was 18, I joined a church and met my first mentor. I'm so grateful for her. She taught me, she was like, oh yeah, the scripture actually changes your life. Like, you actually live like you believe it. And I was like, no way. She was like, true story. So she taught me how to pray and how to really like study the Bible. And I became a worship leader and a small group leader, and like I started serving in the local church, which is like literally so important, just by the way.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it literally changed my life. I was like, oh, so loving Jesus is like outward. It's not just about like how I feel. It's like we
Hmm.
do stuff differently when we love God. And so
Yeah.
that really changed my life. I went to Bible college. I dropped out, but I did go for a year. And I just think that deserves some kind of recognition. Um
100%. Yes.
and I went to Bible college and I learned a lot. And then yeah, I think when I was 21 was the first time I ever said that I'm addicted to porn out loud. It was to my one of
Hmm.
my best friends in Bible college. Her name's Bethany, and we were just sitting. We weren't having like a deep live talk or anything. We were just sitting in the dorm, and we were listening to music. And the song "Come Out of Hiding" by Stephanie Gretzinger came on, and it was all about how like God was waiting for you. He already knew the truth. He just wanted you to say it. And so I was like, I'm addicted to porn. And Bethany was like, okay, how can I support you? And I was like, you don't think
Mm,
I'm gross? And she was like,
mm,
no. I was like, oh. So that was like that I really think 21, 22, like humongous formative, like transformative years of my life where I just was in therapy and regeneration and just really like just confessing all the sin, just throwing it all
mhm,
up and trying to get it out.
mhm,
Um, and really hugely formative years of my life where I was like, okay, I want to actually walk with God. And whenever you want to walk with God, it means you have to die. You have to die to yourself, but you also have to confess your sin, not only just to God, but to each other. Like, to be healed, you confess to each other. So I started like just being really honest about who I was instead of trying to pretend that I like had it all together and I was this amazing Christian girl. I would just post scripture on my Facebook, but not live like I believed it. So
mm,
that was really hugely transformative to learn like, oh, you confess sin, and that's how you like walk hand in hand with the Lord. So those were
mm.
huge years in my life. And then I knew I was called to ministry from the day I was saved, but I never wanted to do it because I'm like, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
still I sometimes think that I'm like, that is a lot of pressure. But um I kind of ignored the call for a while until I started attending a church and serving in their student ministry, serving on the worship team, and just kind of getting my hands into different things and realized I really want to go into ministry. I really want to serve God this way, but I don't know where to go. So I did their internship program, their residency program, and I got to dip my toes in like a ton of different things and realized like God has made me this super creative brain person that just has like all of these creative ideas up here, and he wanted to use them. So I started doing social media at the church I worked at. And that was really my first like experience in ministry. I was a social media manager, and just learned so much about dying to yourself when you're on a team of people and you're an 8 on the Enneagram. It is just absolutely miserable. But yeah, I loved it. And that's whenever I really started doing ministry and like getting involved. And actually, like the first time I shared my story from on stage was in 2017. And from then it was like God was like, just catapulted me into the world.
I find it interesting and intriguing as you're talking. You've listed a bunch of things that I think are like monumental to people growing in their faith. And you talked about discipleship and you talked about serving.
Yeah.
And I think that as we read even the Gospels with Jesus, we see that actually modeled out, is that Jesus is constantly discipling, obviously, and then those disciples are discipling, and it's just a ripple effect. And obviously the biggest thing Jesus did was he came to serve. And we see that that's even, we look at we look at Acts and they talk about what does it look like to be a follower of Jesus. They're serving all around it. And so I think that's interesting to talk about how following Jesus at 16, yes, you knew that you needed a savior. You knew all these things, but it was really the transformation started to take place when you jumped in and were being discipled, which then led to you discipled and also lead to your serving. Yep. I want to ask you, now you're 30, that was 16, that was 21. We've got 11 years in on here. What does that look like for you today, that discipleship aspect and that serving aspect?
Well, right now, I think like one of my biggest passions and just desires is the next generation. I love students. I think I always make the joke I'm going to do student ministry till I'm 75, and everyone always laughs. I'm like, you won't be laughing when I'm in literally with my walker coming in, like trying to join the praise team in the mosh pit. So I love students, and I always have loved students, and the Lord has really given me the gift of connecting to them. And so I always knew I wanted to serve in that capacity. But I don't know, there's like this pressure that comes along. I think a lot of us think like, well, I have to have it all together before I serve in student ministry because I'm supposed to teach them stuff. And how am I supposed to teach them stuff if I'm struggling? This weird thing that this battle you have inwardly. I'm grateful for scripture that tells us that none of us will arrive until the day we meet Jesus, because that's my encouragement and my support there. Is I'm like, I can do this because God is great in me. And I pray that the students always see him before they see anything else. And so I love discipling, and I joined a new church after being out for a while. I joined a new church, and I started serving in student ministry, and I joined a small group. And so face-to-face discipleship for me, one of my favorite people I ever served under, he was a youth pastor. He said, find your 3, build your 12 when it comes to discipleship. And so find your 3, have 3 that are just super close connections that you're face-to-face, like discipling and you're doing the hard work with, and build your 12 people that you're still teaching the rules of discipleship, and you're still meeting with these people like in a large group setting, and they're still learning. But then you find those 3, and then you teach those 3 how to go find their 3, and then they find their 3, and then it's like, basically I hope that like my prayer is that discipling, we just take over the world. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna disciple you, and then you're gonna go disciple her, and then you're gonna disciple her, and everyone's gonna be discipled. But
it's the ripple effect.
The ripple effect of that is it's powerful. And so I serve in student ministry. I love student ministry. And then I serve in our young adult ministry. I just like am kind of around as a person, like if anybody needs prayer or whatever, just to chat, like I'm kind of just around for that. To set up and tear down, like nothing glamorous, but doing those things is serving in the church and discipling are just two of the most important things we can do with our time, to be connected to a local church. And it's, with people like us who travel a lot, and we're speaking and we're doing ministry and we're going and we're on this stage and this conference and this conference, it's like, there has to be a home base. That's my place. This is my place and my people, and they know me and they pray for me, and I can go into this place and I can be known by these people. And it is like, there's just something so powerful about being connected to the local church and serving in that. And I think that student ministry is, it's like my favorite thing in the entire world. And then discipleship face to face looks like praying and asking the Lord, whoever you put in front of me, can you make it clear that this is who I need to disciple them? And I'll be having I have all these coffee dates, and God will just give me that This is it. And I'm like, okay. And then
Mm.
I'm like, so do you want to meet again and again and again and again? And then I just do it. Like one of my friends, Abby, the other day, I discipled her when she was really young, and now she's like a missionary in Tokyo. She's incredible. But she and I were sitting down. And she goes, "It was always so weird to me that you were just in Rockwall, which is my hometown." She's like, "You were just this like lone discipler." She's like, "You would just like literally meet girls for coffee and just disciple them." She was like, "I always was like, where did she come from, and what is she doing?" And she's like, "How are you doing that?" I was like, "I don't know." Just a lone
Just what you're
discipler.
doing. I love it so much. I was thinking about your nanny. I'm just gonna be thinking about your nanny all day today, by the way.
Me too.
Yeah. But I think like when she showed you that journal, I keep going back to
Yeah.
it, I know, but when she showed you that journal when you were still in utero in your mom's belly,
Yeah.
and then she shared the gospel with you when you were 16. And it makes me just think, as people are listening and they have people in their lives, family members, like you even said, I pray that my brothers know the Lord. And that is sometimes a yearning of our heart that takes years and years and years. And
Mhm.
your nanny watched for 16 years
Mhm.
what you went through, what you endured, all of the things, still clinging to a promise that
Mhm.
God had declared to her 16 years earlier than that. I hope that even remembering how long it took for your grandmother, that's encouraging for our listeners. And I hope it's encouraging for you, Lacy, as you even said, like, I'm praying that my brothers come to know the Lord, and
Mhm.
that time is not in our timetable, it's in the Lord's. But I want to ask you this, because I think a lot of listeners struggle with this. You were hurt by people who said they love Jesus.
Yeah.
Specifically having to say the Lord's Prayer every night while also seeing that same person leading you physically abuse. How did you reconcile? I'm going to follow God, even though people who said they followed God had hurt me, because I think a lot of people get
Mhm.
stuck there, hung up there. Understandably, we can all empathize with that,
Mhm.
right? But what was it for you that allowed you to separate the people of God from God?
You know, I love that question, and it's a hard question. It's a hard topic to even talk about, and it's very sensitive. And so I want to be sensitive to the listeners and not say something like I trust my faith is in God and not in the people. I don't want to say anything that would like sweep it under the rug, because the hurt that I've experienced, that other people listening have experienced, is very real, very valid, and can be very traumatizing. Um, but I think that's something that's so important to me. Like I make TikToks, and my content draws a lot of unbelievers, ex-evangelicals, deconstructing people, and I invite it. I'm like, come one, come all to see the show. And I get a lot of comments. And yesterday I got a comment that said, people like this are what made me leave the church and eventually lose my faith in God. And it's like, I wanted to reply and be like, I can totally relate to that, because I can. And you see people that don't reflect the heart of God in leadership positions who have caused horrible pain. I also experienced that in just a few years ago as well, leaving a church. And so you see things like that, and I think our initial response is like to brush it off and be like, okay, well, it's okay. We're all sinners, and we're all, and it's okay that we're not perfect, which those things are true, and that God is perfect, which those things are true. But the reality, I think, of the situation is, in any relationship you go into, you are inviting hurt into your life. So anytime I leave the house, I'm inviting myself to be hurt or disappointed, because everywhere we go, it's like the world is just a sinful disaster of a place a lot of the time. And the
Mm.
church should be different, but a lot of times it isn't, because it's a bunch of sinful people getting under one roof trying to love God well and serve him well. And I think that I guess my thought process and how I've been processing it even over the last few years is, I remember being in my living room on the floor, and I told God, this was like 3 years ago, told God, I'm done with you and I'm done with your church and I'm never going back. And God, I think he just probably laughed and was like, okay, we'll see. But in that moment, that was real to me. I was like, I am not going
Mm.
back to church. I don't want to go. And I think that over the next year and a half, God would reveal himself to me in really small ways and small things that would happen. I would hear his voice. And one of my favorite artists, his name's Anthony Garola, he said to wrestle with God is to still be in his hands. And I love that because whenever we're wrestling with the hurt that's been caused within the institution of the church by people who have claimed the name of Jesus, when we're wrestling with that and we're angry with God or we're angry with those people, we're still close enough in proximity. And so, my encouragement, and I guess what really healed me, was knowing that I was close enough to God to be mad at him and that he wasn't afraid of those things. God wasn't afraid of my anger. He wasn't afraid of my doubts. He wasn't afraid of the questions that I had. He embraced them and embraced me. And I just remember being on my face and telling God, like, I can't do this. I'm so angry. These people. He's like, I love you. He's like, in Lamentations, it's like, yet this I call to mind and I dare to believe. I dare to hope. It's like in Lamentations 3, it's like, I remember the bitterness and the wormwood and the depression. If the story stopped there, it would be utterly hopeless, right? But it keeps going. He said, yet this I call to mind, and therefore I dare to believe. I dare to hope that the faithful love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. And so I think that in my life personally, still to this day, we battle. We're inviting, joining a new church, you're inviting disappointment and but you're also inviting community and these deep godly relationships and this stuff. And you choose, is it worth it to be hurt? And the answer for me is yes. It's worth it to be disappointed by a believer, to be able to be surrounded by many and to be able to be in the body of Christ. It's like, there is nothing like knowing that people are praying for you and that they love you and that they see your flaws and that they're open to your hurt and that they'll still come alongside you. They'll disappoint you. And of course they'll upset you. But this I call to mind. I'm like, what can I call to mind about the faithfulness of God? And I can believe that about him when I can't believe that about his people.
Thank you for that encouragement. And I know that encouragement comes from a place of understanding because it is your story as well. And thank you for not saying like it just love God and keep going, because it's harder than that. It's more nuanced than that. Lacy, I am beyond honored to have you on my show today. And I am so grateful that even though I ghosted you, you still let me have a second chance and that you still took me in to your friendship and you didn't throw me out as the trash. Never. Lacy, I'd love to hear from you. What are you reading these days? What are you loving? What's exciting you?
So I am reading, well, I haven't started reading it yet. I just got a new book yesterday, Praying Like Monks, Living Like Fools.
I have that book too.
Okay, I just got it yesterday, so I'm about to start reading that.
Okay.
Super excited about that read for sure. And I'm studying Matthew. So I'm doing like a Gospels study with people. So yesterday I studied 3 chapters of Matthew. And if you guys saw me in a coffee shop in Dallas crying, it was because I was reading the crucifixion of Jesus. And I had to keep going to chapter 28 because I was like, I can't leave on this. I'm so upset. So I am studying the book of Matthew. We just finished. And we're about to start a study in James with my small group youth students. So That's kind of what we're doing.
I love it so much. I just started, even though this is not new, she's been doing this since the beginning of the year, listening to Annie F. Downs read through the Gospels. And every month she reads through all the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in a different translation. And so
cool.
I know. So I listen to that on my walks when I'm out and about. And I'm just like, oh, it's getting it in and it's, different than sitting down and reading. Lacy,
love that.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. I am so grateful for Nanny, and she's with Jesus. And golly, she'd be so proud of you right now.
Thank you.
She'd probably get on TikTok just to follow you and leave you great comments.
I can't. Not my nanny on TikTok.
Okay, guys, if you are on TikTok, if you are on TikTok, you need to go follow Lacy because that's where you do some great content. And I'm not even on TikTok. I need to go follow you. We've had this discussion offline before. I need to get on TikTok, but I don't want to. But anyhow, that is a different subject for a different day. Lacy, I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you.